Okay, so guys, we are looking at the agency theory, and this is 2015. So agency theory is part of part A. So by now we've done 1, 2, 3. So we're on agency problem, then we just have one more to go. So we are looking at 2015, question 5. Corporate managers are supposed to work for the interests of their company's stakeholders. However, in real life, this might not always be the case. Explain graphically how the agency cost of equity and debt might lead to a unified theory of capital structure. Now, I'm lucky enough to have the feedback, so we can see what Christine expects of us. So you don't just write about agency problem, you have to divide it in accordance to what she has put in the lecture. So she wants us to look at the agency problem from external equity, and then the agency debt holder conflicts, which are risk shifting and asset substitution. And then after, we draw the graph of agency problems and we just explain the meaning of the graph. So that's what we need to do to get full marks for this question. So it's lecture 4, spring lecture 4. So you can take a look at the lecture notes there. So what is agency cost? So the agency costs are incurred due to conflicting relationships between internal and external shareholders and the shareholder and debt holders. So that's all you need to know. And then it comes about as a result of the principal agent problem. So in most firms, the finance providers are called principals, and they're not able to actively manage the firm. So they employ managers known as the agents. And most times, the agents don't act in the best interests of the equity holders. So that's basically the whole concept. So now, after you just give a brief description of this, you move on to asset substitution, and you just give a simple example. So consider two investments, project A and B. The firm will borrow money to fund project A, but then change their mind to fund project B after obtaining the loan. And this can be basically explained that maybe they realized that project B is probably more profitable, so they invest in that rather than project A. So that's asset substitution. So you just give a quick definition there. Now risk shifting, it says the shareholder of a leverage firm may take more riskier projects as they will gain at the expense of the creditors. So basically, most times projects which are more risky give a higher return. So by investing in them, the shareholder has nothing to lose really, because the source of funding is mainly from creditors. So you just highlight that point. Now we move on to external equity. And in external equity, the assumption is that the firm is 100% equity financed. So you can mention that. And then you just highlight that a proportion of the equity is held by outsiders and not the management. So the manager, who is the agent, has to undertake activities which maximize shareholder wealth and increase the value of the firm. So for the managers, the more effort they put into the business, the more it costs them, and they want to keep the cost low so that they can profit from it. So as a result of that, the shareholders incur monitoring costs. So they basically pay for the managers to be monitored. For example, they hire external auditors to come and check how the managers are getting on. So that's the 3 points that Christine wants us to really talk about when it comes to agency cost of debt. And then now we go to the graph. It's a fairly simple graph. Basically, just memorize it really, but I'll just give a little explanation. So on the vertical axis, you'd have the cost, and then on the horizontal axis would be the debt to equity ratio. So you'd have these lines intersecting, and then you'd have the agency cost of debt to the left, and then the agency cost of equity to the right, and there needs to be a balance between the two. So what you would say is you just draw this graph and you would explain that the agency cost of debt increases with the level of debt. So the more money that's involved in the company, the more money that the equity holders will spend trying to get the firm monitored and to monitor the activities of the managers. And then also the